We're excited to be here. Thanks so much for CILA and the Commission for putting this on. And thank you, Mari Carmen and Jill, for coming to share your programs. We've kind of got three parts of the presentation. First is two program highlights. But I know from Texas, we also have KIND and Raices and the Galveston-Houston Immigration Pro Bono Project. So kind of part two is our dialogue, which we're going to just be hitting on many of the great things introduced in the last portion with a lively question and answer. So don't hesitate to chat during the presentations, but we might not get back to you until after the presentation. So if I could turn it to Jill, who could kick it off to talk about your kind of two pro bono highlights from Baker Ripley.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Anne, for doing the slides.
Yeah.
So I know that this group has a lot of pro bono experience already. So what I thought, I would do is kind of share some hot tips for ways that Baker Ripley has creatively used pro bonos. And hopefully not as a way to kind of instruct you guys on what to do, but maybe to get thinking of ideas that you haven't utilized before, different ways to think about it. And also some learned lessons from the 15 years that Baker Ripley has been doing small, medium, and large scale workshops, because we often have partners coming to us saying, we really want to run workshops with pro bonos. How do we do it? Baker Ripley, the Immigration and Citizenship Program, was established in 2007. And mostly the only thing that Baker Ripley did from 2007 to 2011-ish was large-scale naturalization workshops, doing assisted pro se naturalization. So we were kind of founded on a large-scale workshop model, and we've been utilizing and perfecting that workshop model for the last 15 years. We are a small to medium-sized program, about 18 staff members, and we do have a holistic program that is co-led by a social worker and a managing attorney, and half of our staff is social work and half of our staff is legal. And what kind of is something unique about the way we work, and I also kind of just so you guys can understand context, or if the question comes up of like, but wait, how do you screen for income at a workshop, or how do you, do that? We don't have income requirements. We don't have demographic constraints or geographic constraints on who we serve. So we're really community-based program, open to everyone. And we do, because we're small, we do rely on workshops and a volunteer base of about 250 volunteers to accomplish our program goals. So workshops and pro bonos is a huge part of what we do. I'll say of that 250, that is not lawyers. So that's a combination of lawyers and non-lawyers. And I've also got some tips on working with non-lawyers. And we're housed at community centers in the Houston area. So you see, if you've ever seen Baker Ripley Community Center before, that's what we're housed out of. And a lot of our work, and I also I know we're talking about pro bonos, but there's a strong value in partnerships with non-legal immigration organizations and grassroots groups. And a lot of our work we're able to accomplish because of those partnerships, both for pulling on a volunteer base and getting the work done. It's a little bit about us. So I was going to talk about kind of two ways that we utilize pro bonos. One is with application assistance events, or like large scale workshops, assisted pro se workshops, or even workshops where you're doing G28s. And then the other I'll go over in a moment is our resident volunteer attorney, which we've been doing since about 2017, kind of working on that. And that's something that we're really proud to utilize at Baker Ripley. So application assistance events, just kind of an overview. They could be small, medium, large scale events. We tend to cap it now at 75. When applying for status became terribly more difficult in the Trump administration, we used to kind of do events, we'd take in maybe 130 people. That kind of got scaled down because it now takes more effort to kind of get an application done and to address all of the legal issues we need to address. So we usually cap it about 75 people. And our larger events usually have no pre-registration, they're walk-in basis. The larger events we like to do on Saturdays to make those services accessible to people that might be working during the week. And then small, medium events, sometimes we'll have pre-registration. All of our events are heavily marketed on the radio, TV, social media, and we have a hotline. So kind of thinking about people are coming from all different areas and hearing about us in different ways. And the way that we utilize pro bonos at these workshops is that our pro bonos are mostly used for legal screenings and then for kind of review of the application at the end for quality control. So think of it as like a, like a hamburger, right? So you've got your attorney screening on the front side to determine if you're eligible for relief or if you need to be triaged into an in-house program. And then you've got an attorney at the other end that's kind of reviewing the completed application. And then we actually have trained non-attorneys filling out the applications. And so our pro bonos will be trained on how to do legal screenings. And we actually have them do a couple of times that they're just doing legal screenings before they're trained on how to do kind of, sometimes we call it quality control, sometimes we call it checkout, but that last review of the applications. We use our staff. And so one of the key things here is our staff aren't ever kind of sitting down and doing those roles that the pro bonos are doing. Instead, what our staff are doing is they're floating and answering questions, and they're serving sometimes as an added layer of screening. So kind of effectively using your staff, especially for a small program, right? It doesn't make sense if our staff is kind of sitting there, kind of occupying a space that a pro bono attorney could be at. And our staff is better utilized being able to answer questions, because the last thing you want is that there's not someone available, to answer a question, and then a pro bono answers it, maybe not in the right way. We'd rather have those attorneys and DOJ representatives readily available to answer those questions, and to troubleshoot and to do interventions as needed. And then our staff, sometimes if it's a form of relief that we feel like you need actually 2 legal screenings, this sounds weird, but we actually have 2 legal screenings. One happens with staff at the get-go, which is the most kind of material questions or most legally consequential questions at screening. And then after they get through staff, they go to a pro bono who does the full legal screening, so that those most important questions are answered, are actually asked 2 times from an applicant, but that also, because they tend to be the more technically complicated ones, that we have the staff answering those. And the reason that we did that is because, I guess we can move to the next slide, Anne. We want to keep our volunteers really happy. And I'll say, when I talk about small, medium, large scale workshops, it's about keeping them happy, staying humble, and I'll talk about why I say that, and having fun. Because if someone is engaging in a one-time event, they really are there because they want to have that kind of that endorphin hit for one day, that team bonding for one day. They really want to get something out of it and walk away with really good feelings. And we want them to walk away with really good feelings because we want them to come back. Because if you're having to constantly go out and recruit new volunteers, it's exhausting, it's resource intensive, and you want to build that base of volunteers that is always coming back. And the way you do that is if they're happy. What we have found, and I know this conversation is also in a post-COVID, but I'm going to constantly be referring to a Trump stuff that started with the Trump era, right? In 2017. What we noticed was that the community was a little bit more scared. We were having to do deeper screenings on things like criminal history that we knew were being highly scrutinized at the local USCIS office. And that if we kind of put the pressure of those really technical or legally consequential questions on the shoulder of the pro bonos at that one-day event, it would stress the pro bonos out a little bit. Or if they're having to kind of be the first time that the applicant is engaging about criminal history is with that pro bono, that could be a stressful conversation, both for the applicant and the pro bono, and can kind of create confusion and tension and stress. And so if we were able to kind of get those issues out of the way before the person saw the pro bono, we found that the pro bonos were a bit happier. And again, we like happy pro bonos. And so that kind of goes to when you're thinking about your event and what you're doing, what's the level of how deep technically are you going? What's the level of legal expertise and knowledge that's necessary? And make sure that you're matching that event and that pro bono with what they're expecting that they're going to do. So they may not want to come to a one-day event where they're having to kind of go through the modified categorical approach around a criminal history, right? Or, do some of those, do an analysis of if someone's N600 eligible, because we all love that part of PERS bands where we're having to go into the charts, right? And we let our legal staff do those things so that our pro boners are really kind of doing the comprehensive screening that maybe has already addressed those questions. And we found that it's effective. They're getting through applicants faster at these large scale events, and the pro boners are happier because they're maybe not deep in this really difficult kind of like legal conversation that they're having to have, or feeling like they need to know the answers. So that's kind of the transition now into some strategies we've learned. One is build your base now. Start building your volunteer base now, and you'll never know how you're going to use them in the future. Don't wait until you're deciding to get into like large scale events to then start building it. Start building your interest now so that you can pull on them as needed. A pro bono who can do a full direct representation case now may not have capacity. Maybe their life changes. Maybe they're going up for partner in the future and they can only do Saturday events, right? And so you might leverage them, in different ways in the future. So build your base now and keep them happy. Making sure when you're doing an event that your event is that it's suited for what you're trying to do. So I know, and I have in my notes here, sometimes we get push or pressure from a corporate or a pro bono partner or even a donor to put certain types of applications into a workshop style. If your gut's telling you this isn't something that should be in a workshop style, don't do it. And I put in here, if you're not sure if something's a good fit for a workshop style, talk to me. We've tried workshops for everything under the sun. I've learned the hard way. And if it's not, then realign what that partner or that donor is looking for. Don't feel pressured into doing something, because in the end, you'll have unhappy pro bonos if it doesn't run smoothly, and then, you won't have them engaged in the future. So really making sure that it's suited for that. We have done small, medium, large scale events in the past. We have done TPS. Really, it's things that are kind of reactive. We've done DACA, we've done TPS. Even in the beginning Trump years, we did workshops with Houston volunteer lawyers on filling out paperwork for parents to designate someone to be able to take care of their child if they were apprehended by ICE and deported. So there are certain things you can do in a workshop style, but it's not everything. And I say that being, the person who's running around Houston right now doing asylum pro se workshops. So just, I also clearly I test the limits of my own advice. And so the other thing to do is setting expectations. Sorry, I forgot to plug in my computer. Let me do that real quick. There we go. Sorry, guys. Setting expectations for your volunteers, letting them know, they want to know exactly what they're walking into, training them, letting them, we even let them know the temperature of the room they're going to be in that day. I know that sounds trivial, but if they're really, really cold and they were like, why didn't someone tell me to bring a jacket? They're going to walk away not happy. And so, again, we want them to kind of enjoy their time and come back. Anticipate for logistical hiccups. So know what you're going to do if printers don't work, right? We're nonprofits. Printers frequently don't work. Internet frequently goes out. Your pro bono partners may not have experienced that in the past, right? That might not be adversity that they have to deal with at their workplace. So how are you going to try to anticipate for those hiccups and prevent them to happen? Or if they do happen, what's your plan you have in place to make sure things run smoothly? The last thing I'll say on this, other than keep them happy, is the one where I say stay humble. In workshops, pro bonos love to give feedback. Take that feedback. It's almost like you're in a customer service business in many ways. Like, be humble. And sometimes they suggest things, or they make you look at something in a way that you maybe didn't look at before because you were so deep down in the weeds that, I always just try to keep an open mind and stay humble. And then I'm open to feedback from pro bonos because they love to give it, because as attorneys, we love to talk. And so let's go real quick to resident volunteer attorneys. So we started doing this, again, I always say 2017 is when we started doing this. This is a situation where we utilize somebody who's a licensed attorney. They are in a place where, and I'll just say this because one of the big things here is like exploiting people's labor and exploiting people's work. They're usually in a very financially stable situation that they can volunteer many hours a week. And that they're looking for some sort of personal growth or some sort of personal kind of, commitment or getting those endorphins as a reason for doing it. And I'll give a couple of examples. So during the Trump years, we had some retired attorneys reach out and they said, I'm just so angry, I need to do something. I'm sitting here every day at my house, typing on Facebook, just angry. I want to channel it. I'm a licensed attorney. I'm inactive, or, I want to get back to being active. What can I do? right? And they wanted to do more. Like, I come to your Saturday things, I want to do more, right? And I'm sure you guys have had people reach out like that, right? We kind of just took advantage of that opportunity. We said, well, let's figure out what we can do. And so we found a way that they can kind of make a weekly commitment for a certain period of time. And they come in and they're part of our team. They office in our office. They have caseloads. And they're really actually helping us with delivering on our goals and increasing capacity. Another example that we've had is, again, after Trump, a lot of people got interested in pivoting their careers, maybe going from tax into immigration work, maybe going from private, I don't know, different ways in private practice that they were operating, even doing like criminal or civil, and they wanted to go into immigration work. But, you know, how do you even get that experience? And they would come and say, I want to volunteer on a regular basis, you know? I want to come to more than your Saturday workshop. Teach me how to do adjustment of status. And so we were able to leverage those volunteers as well to come in-house. And the last slide here is who's a good fit? Yeah, move the slide. Great. So things you can look at the slide on who's a good fit. I'm just being kind of cognizant of time. Great. Anne says I have 2 minutes. You can look at that slide on who's a good fit, but those are some of our ideas. And then what we have developed is kind of a checklist of like what you should do if you want to engage in this way. You know, it can help you build capacity with your program. It can help you serve people. You're not pressured to put everything in a workshop mode in order to take advantage of attorneys that want to give a lot of their time. So these are the things that we all had to consider. I recommend having multiple meetings with someone who's interested in doing this before you commit to saying yes. Have a conversation of what their expectations are and what they're willing to commit to, because you are going to have some financial and some resource commitments as well. So you want to make sure it's a really good fit and you're partnering with the right person. So having a budget for things, talking to your insurance broker, is the agency going to have to purchase a laptop for this person? Do we have to get their license on our case management system? So making a budget, you know, if you are leadership or talking to your leadership about this. For us, I mean, it really has been nominal for the amount of work that we're able to accomplish with the pro bono. The pro bonos will carry their own caseload. But then there's a conversation around expectations. You know, are they going to file G28s? What are the pros and cons? What's the expectation? Who's paying for their bar dues? You know, we don't want them to enter in something with misaligned expectations and then just be disappointed in the end, because what's the theme? Keep them happy. We don't want them to think that they're going to have legal assistance support, and then we turn around and we go, oh no, we didn't ever plan to give you legal assistance support. You were on your own, right? What's their title going to be? These are all things that we had to sit down and consider and talk about before bringing someone on. I recommend asking someone to make at least a year-long commitment. And I know that's a lot, and that's not going to work for everyone. For every, 5 people that we talked to about this, maybe only one works out. Because they go, oh, well, no, I go to Scottsdale in the fall. I can't be here this fall. Well, that's not a great fit. We need someone who's kind of around, a lot, can work independently, and making sure you're stewarding these in-house, resident volunteer attorneys. And what we found is that the best way to do it is to really make them part of your team. They come to team meetings if they want to. They go to professional development opportunities with the team. They're really treated as part of the team. And aside from the endorphins they get from helping clients, they're able to feel like they're kind of back in a workplace where we're really kind of, fighting the good fight. So yeah, I think my time is up to kind of move on.
Thank you, Jill. That was amazing. Okay, I'm pivoting quickly to Mari Carmen to share about your work.
Thanks, Anne, and thanks, Jill. I completely agree with everything Jill said. The most important thing really is to keep our pro bono volunteers and our volunteers in general happy. I'm going to talk a little bit about how Tahirih Justice Center takes an approach on pro bono work, because it's a little bit different than Baker Ripley and the style and the types of cases perhaps that we may work on. And I know many of you may not be completely familiar with the Tahirih Justice Center, so I'm just going to talk a little bit on this slide about what we do, who we are. And also, I don't know if I introduced myself, but I am the chief of programs for the Tahirih Justice Center. I've been here for 2.5 years. Prior to joining Tahirih, I did work at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid for over 21 years. So Tahirih Justice Center is a Baha'i-inspired legal immigration services organization. They've been around for over 25 years, and we have 5 offices across the United States in 5 different states. We have an office in Atlanta, Georgia, an office in San Bruno, California, which is basically San Francisco, Falls Church, Virginia, Baltimore, Maryland, and Houston, Texas, which is where I am located. And our very specific mission is like to work with immigrant survivors of gender-based violence. So I know there are many immigrants that need legal assistance, but our specific area of focus is only working with those that have experienced gender-based violence. We do this in a very trauma-informed, client-centered, interdisciplinary approach, similar to what Jill was mentioning. We have both attorneys on staff and social services attorneys that work together hand in hand in a very interdisciplinary way, not side by side, but really crafting the work together to get our clients to the other side of the legal immigration hurdle that they're struggling through. Not only do we provide legal services, we do training and education, and we also do some public policy work. I wanted to share the types of immigration cases that we normally have. This is from our 2022 year to end information, because you will see that the majority of our cases are concentrated in asylum and U visas, which everybody in this room understands like how difficult and challenging those cases may be. And because it is also individuals that have not only suffered the trauma of immigration and the impact that entails, they're also struggling or surviving or dealing still in active gender-based violence situations. So the majority are VAWA, U and asylum. Of course, we do have some VAWA cases, T cases, SIJ cases, and some of our permanent residency adjustment of status is to support those cases that we have already accepted. Because of the type of work that we do and because of the care that some of, all of our clients are entitled to, our pro bono model has focused on individual case assignments to pro bono partners. And we're doing it on a co-counseling agreement. So every attorney that takes on a case on a pro bono basis has a co-counseling agreement where our in-house Tahrir attorney will be working with the attorney from beginning to end. The G28 is only signed by the attorney who is doing the active representation, but we are equally responsible for the outcomes of the case, and we're walking side by side with the pro bono attorney through the duration of the case. One of the really great advantages is that during this process, when they have accepted a case that may take more than, it's not a single clinic event, but it may last, as as long as immigration cases may last. It is really important that our pro bono teams have access to supportive social services. And so through our co-counseling partnering agreement, we're able to do that and still do that under the cover of an attorney-client privilege. So this is a really great advantage for all of our clients that continue to get that supportive services as they are working with their attorney. We do also do from time to time clinics for EADs, adjustment of status, but that is really not something that is done all the time. It's when our clients that we currently have may need that, and then we will also work with pro bono partners to get those clinics underway. The one project that I wanted to talk to you about that is maybe a little bit different, that is new, and it's just something that we did recently, is that we stood up an Afghan Asylum Project, and this has been incredibly successful, and it was a brand new model for kind of adapting what we already were doing and then like taking it to the different level. We all were watching, as individuals started to flee Afghanistan. And this has been an area that we had worked on 20 years ago when Tahrir had first started. And we did work with Afghan women at that point. So we knew what the Taliban and the government under Taliban rule would do and how women would really be impacted. And we really found that it was a calling, given our mission, to do something to respond to that event. We started a helpline. After we did that, we started to get referrals, not only from individuals that were self-identifying and saying we need this help, but from major partners that said, we are working already with some individuals that were running State Department equivalent in Afghanistan, women's shelters, judges, individuals that really would be at high risk. So those individuals were being referred to us because in addition to needing asylum, we really needed to talk about the gender-based issue that was there. So we worked together with the State Department, Crowell and Mooring, American University, and we did refer and receive those cases. We also partnered with Mayor Brown, who had been working with the Asian University for Women. When Afghanistan fell, there had been women that were studying at American University for Women, and because it was COVID, they were all in Afghanistan when this happened. So they worked really closely to help them evacuate. And all of a sudden, they had 167 women who were students pursuing their education who would be in danger and now in the United States. So we immediately mobilized, working together with all of our partners to figure out a way how we could process that many individuals with cases that were so difficult, because Tahrir, we may be in 5 states, but we are really small organizations. And we were also just coming out of the pandemic. So, everything had been stopped, the courts have been slowed down. So the capacity and bandwidth to take this type of cases, we had to be incredibly creative. So working with our partners, they said, we'll find you the pro bono attorneys that you need to make sure everybody is represented and that we have coverage for them, but we're going to have to do things different. One of the things that was an issue for us was we didn't have enough capacity to do all of those intakes to start working when there's a timeline about how soon you needed to apply for asylum. So we worked with our pro bonos, trained them, worked on doing trauma-informed legal intakes, and gave them the access to enter information through a secure portal directly into our database. So they were able to connect with the individuals from the beginning after receiving training and then work their cases throughout on their own. So we were able to have like almost 100 intakes like within like a couple of weeks, which was really, really amazing. Ultimately, from all of the individuals that applied, we opened 218 asylum cases, and they all received direct legal representation. The other thing that was really unique is that as our clients were all first in a camp or where they were received, they eventually were spread out throughout the entire country. So Tahrir is not in every single state. We don't have expertise in many jurisdictions, but because we were working with these law firms that had extensive connections or many locations, we were able to actually keep all of the clients regardless of where they were transferred to and continue to represent them in locations that we had never been, like Arizona, Detroit. I mean, there was just like a breadth of new areas that we were learning about together with our partners. We were able to also, there were 41 cities total where we were able to represent individuals over 18 different states. The total number of attorneys that we were able to mentor and support and continue to do that until now, because we don't have all of the answers yet or the grants. We are starting to receive them, but you know how that is going. They have been meeting with us, and the support that we have been providing was through 2 project attorneys that were part-time, a project coordinator, 1 part social service associate, and then of course we did have also somebody in-house that was working with us part-time that was an interpreter. But we created a model where we would come in, do office hours, and then have individual appointments with our project attorneys as those applications were being developed, provide review, but all of the representation really happened through our pro bono counsel. So it was pretty astonishing. And because they worked with this client from beginning to end, and some of these cases have been moving much more quicker than traditional asylum cases, they have like really worked so much and connected in such a personal way with the clients that they're saying like we're going to be on board for their adjustment as well. So they're continuing to serve, and it really created a really beautiful bond between attorneys and clients that we continue to support. And so I wanted to share that. It's another thing that kind of developed, that it's a new model. I know that there's been many ways that folks have been serving Afghan immigrants to our country, but I wanted to share what we did, and that is still something that has been very successful for us. And I know I have 3 minutes left. Thank you, Anne. So this is some of the things that we did through the project, and I think I already covered it. We did initial mandatory trainings on gender-based asylum. What does it mean? How do you do trauma-informed lawyering for this special community and population? Created scripts, and gave them access to our legal server. The weekly drop-in office hours were crucial at the beginning. We had like over 100 attorneys joining, taking notes. It was recorded. And then, of course, as the process continued, folks were starting to submit their applications. We're still having them to this day. So just so that you know, that has been like a key and cornerstone to the work. We offer consultations, review of filings, and then as this process continues, we're also offering social service support and referrals.
Thank you, Mari Carmen. All right, so we're going to transition to a dialogue, but before doing that, I just wanted to say 2 or 3 minutes about myself. I tend to know a little bit about what Mari Carmen is talking about because I had the honor of being at Talk-Ready Justice Center for 10 years. And I'm really excited for both these speakers who kind of showed like massive scale clinics that have been tremendously successful, as well as like recruiting 500 attorneys that actually say yes to representation on an asylum case these days with an indefinite in is a real heroic act. So I'm really just astonished and glad to hear that. And so we kind of want to talk a lot about recruitment. But before we get to recruitment, let me just say, Texas Immigration Law Council is a brand new organization. Don't Google us because we don't even have our website up. But one thing we're trying to do is to build capacity and to support the many amazing immigration legal services across Texas, as well as to engage in policy advocacy. And I've had conversations with about representatives of 28 organizations. And on that topic has been pro bono, and like, if we were to help in capacity building around pro bono, what would you want us to do? And the number one thing is like, we got training and this and that. We need help in recruitment. So it's to no surprise that CILA is helping with children's cases on this because it's really needed. So we do want to talk about that art of recruitment. But before that, just wanted to talk a little bit about pooling. Oh, let me stop sharing and turn to our dialogue. Okay. So please ask questions and engage in the chat, and we're going to have some verbal dialogue as well. But first, around the pro bono, when you're sitting there and creating your projects, as firms are calling you, or you're thinking about engaging firms, what are some of the best practices or kind of lessons you've learned?
I'll kind of go back to making sure it's the right fit. I think we all believe in a client-centered approach to lawyering. And so first and foremost, asking yourself, is this the best fit for serving these clients? And the way that we're going to do this, even down to, can we do this virtually or does it have to be in person? Can it be in a large scale setting where you can hear other people talking? Is it too confusing and overwhelming to do a 14-page application in a workshop for the client, right? I know I talked about let's keep the pro bonos happy, but I think first and foremost, when you're planning, it's the client-centered approach to making sure that that's the right fit as well. In thinking if it's going to work out. The structure then is, if it's not the right fit, I think it's really important to always be solution oriented with the pro bonos who want to engage and find a way to engage them. And really listening, like really like don't talk, listen. Like listen to what your pro bono partner wants. Like we work with a lot of corporate partners, and sometimes they come in thinking they want to do a workshop because it sounded exciting and all of that. But really what they end up doing is they're packing we create these welcome packages for asylum seekers, and they get a lot out of that. Even lawyers come to do that. And so it's really like when you're going into that planning around things, it's really listening. And if what they want to get out of it is just something lower key, and it doesn't have to even be like legal, but it's still supporting the social work side of your program, then pivoting and going to that, but making sure that what's going to work for the client first. And then I think
I know
a lot of,
you happened to mention you were doing affirmative asylum workshops. Now I've done those before, and like at the end of the Saturday, I've been like, please, I'm so exhausted. We did 10 applications in envelopes. Please tell me that was client-centered. So I guess, how do you assess like whether an event is client-centered? I mean, like, what's your, is it talking to the volunteer attorneys? Are they happy? This and that? Will they return? How clients are usually so grateful, and it's sometimes hard to get negative feedback from clients getting free services.
Yeah. And I think it's we measure results also based on like approvals, or if there's applications that are kicked back. We do that follow-up with clients to make sure that their case is being resolved in the right way. Consider, is this an application that has strict deadlines? That's something to think about. So like if this is an application that's like a DACA renewal that generally can be filed in the next few weeks, thinking about whether you G28 or not, TPS, and everyone's got a hard deadline nationally, but you're doing your workshop 3 days before, like what does that look like? Because that client's going to be walking in needing to meet that deadline, and then how you kind of build that workshop around that. Because for us, if we're coming up on a strict deadline, we will want to G28 those, because we want to make sure that we're getting them in the mail, they're going. If it's something that's not really deadline intensive, maybe, and we don't have capacity at G28, maybe we consider that. So I think that you can't make like a one size fits all for workshops. Then, on the pro bono side, when you're talking about asylum, a pro bono doesn't have to fill out the entire asylum application. And can you find a way to really just leverage pro bonos on one simpler or less intense piece of the case? And so, maybe that is just legal screenings, right? And they're not filling out the application. Maybe it's just the questions in the asylum application about, those paragraph questions about fear. Maybe that the client's already mapped out their fear and their explanation, and then that kind of mini declaration is handed to the pro bono, and there's conversation around that. So I think that in the more complicated ones, it never works if the pro bono is like there from very beginning to very end, and like it's overwhelming. And so I think, can you piece little things out? Can you give them a task, right? Can you kind of give them a piece of the task to help accomplish those things? That's some approaches.
I was going to add, Jill, and I think you're so right. It's so important that how you do the trauma-informed approach. And I think it also starts with our organizations, and not only setting expectations for pro bonos, but for our clients, right? Because too many times they don't know what to expect through the process. And that could be, also like, who's going to represent me? Do you represent me? Does the pro bono represent me? And so like really also getting that information, setting those expectations, what to do that day, I think is incredibly important, and setting both up for success. So I think we need to do equal work with both to make sure that is going to be as smooth as possible. So I just wanted to share that piece that we cannot overlook.
That's great. Thank you all. Okay, let's move that. We can loop back to mapping out the project, but let's move to recruitment, since it's, to me, always like, I don't know what the saying is, hard. That's all I can say. Exhausting. So there are lots of ways to think about recruitment, but if we just think about them in a couple of bundles, one is, who's going to be the person making the ask, and then maybe the how and the what, like moving to the mechanics of the ask. And on the who, okay, I have a fun question here for chat, hoping people can engage. Let's see. what strategies have you used to try to figure out how to get a volunteer attorney to say yes to maybe not the funnest, easiest clinic, but like you really need some representation going on here. We need court, there is deadline, there is going to be a lot of work. How can you be strategic about really stretching volunteers out of their comfort zone to do the work when a client cannot self-navigate or you don't have the staff to represent? Okay, I have to get some responses, y'all. The question is, who do you think is going to get the most impact? And yes, we've got one answer, and the question is a partner. The idea is, first, can you get the leadership at a law firm engaged, and they are pushing their associates, both maybe in your city as well as nationally, to help in-house attorneys? Can you develop a project with a law firm where the in-house attorneys are doing your invitations for you because everybody wants Exxons and Shells? Maybe I asked this question because I come from Houston with big legal departments who are able to move at law firms to say yes on pro bono. A judge, love it using judges. The last 3 years, I was not really in the immigration space. I was with Houston Volunteer Lawyers and realized they were using things like the Power Act, and I'll share the ABA little manual on this, partnering with the domestic violence organizations to get the judges to do wine and cheese receptions where it's like, come, hear about representing a client with Houston Volunteer Lawyers. Oh, hi, Joe, I'll see you on Wednesday. You don't have a file in your hand. Here's an HVL case, just literally handing out our files to attorneys that didn't have anything to do except for toast to the judge and nod their head. Of course, I'll take two. And so how do we get judges to say yes? And finally, the last one was, who could say no to Monte Carlo Jill? I couldn't. They could just call you and I'll be like, okay, I can do it. I can take another case. So we've got 3s, 4s, 2s, and 4s. Okay, nobody said yes to one. Anyway. All right. So how do you guys make the ask and how does that work? Buddy Carmen, you carried us a little bit about the origins and the strategy behind the Afghan Asylum Project.
We were really lucky that we have been working already with so many firms, but our biggest allies within the firms that we work with is our pro bono coordinator. Just really engaging them in the work on the project, what we're trying to do. We realize that many of our partners work with many other individuals and organizations and nonprofits offering legal services. So sometimes when we might be like trying to come up with a project enlisting, some of our pro bono coordinators have been really helpful because they've seen how other places have done it and what might work to serve the needs, or if we're thinking of a clinic or something that may be more enticing, like they're able to give us a little bit of feedback of what they're looking for. And sometimes they also talk amongst themselves and they'll be like, I'm not taking a case right now, but my friend at this other law firm, I think they're looking for this. I have heard that, and we did get a couple of referrals like that, especially during the Afghan Asylum Project while we were doing that they were referring, talk to my friend so-and-so at this other firm. They have new associates. They want to get them, some experience. So we were able to leverage those relationships to really find other attorneys and resources. So they've been instrumental in our success.
Yeah. We work with corporate partners a fair amount. And so I think this is where I'll bring up, when you're planning an event, maybe having roles for non-attorneys as well, or you're planning projects. Because if we were trying to bring in a corporate partner, even if it's their general counsel's office, they'll still have paralegals or other support staff. And they say, well, we want everyone to be involved. So what can you do if you're not an attorney? And so I think whenever you're planning, if it's a workshop or clinic event, thinking about, have you built in those roles for the non-attorneys? Because you're more likely to get those groups from corporations to come and commit if it's not just for legal staff. And we found that it's successful for corporate groups and bringing them in if they can use it as a team building experience. And especially now in post-COVID, where everyone's working it virtually across the country, we could say, hey, if you're all going to have like your meeting in Houston, like tack on a pro bono event, and come to this as your team building that you do. And Saturday events, even like we'll say, we know it's a Saturday, bring your teenage kid and your partner, even though they're not attorneys, and we'll have some something for your teenager and your partner to do also, so it could actually be a family activity. And that's how you get those high quality pro bonos to dedicate their time and to dedicate their Saturday mornings. So I think thinking through that's how you can recruit from those corporate groups. I think corporate groups are fabulous. They tend to be really reliable. They tend to have one leader, whether it's kind of their engagement manager from the corporation or like one strong leader on their team, and they always want to keep, staying up to date. Now at certain corporations, they'll have, employee resource groups or employee affinity groups, where it's like working moms, we have here at Bigger Ripley, we have, an employee resource group, or LGBTQ. And what we've found is that those groups will want to go and actually find things to do for, team building or bonding or activities. And that, especially the Latinx groups, they tend to have an affinity towards doing immigration work. And we've had really awesome products. We're actually hosting one, let's say Saturday morning, from Corbridge, which is formerly AIG. And we've been engaging with them regularly. So, but again, that group will be mixed attorney, non-attorney. So how are you offering something for everyone in order to get them on board?
That kind of brings us into, Cheryl talked in the last session a lot about the mechanics of the ask and the demographic that we're making the ask and how they communicate in different ways. Just wondering, in terms of the volunteers that you're recruiting, is that mostly like structured team versus individual ask? And if so, if you could talk a little bit about the mechanics of the ask and the context of it. Are you recruiting one group who kind of comes as a unit, or is it a combination, and what that looks like?
Sometimes it's a single individual who happened to come to one of our events and wants to be engaged. We also recruit that if you're interested in our civic engagement work at Baker Ripley, meaning you go out and do block walking around elections, you tend to also maybe be interested in immigration work. So we kind of find where some of those, crossover interests might be, and tend to be like an individual that then gets their company on board. And sometimes it's also like we have a corporate partner for donations that want to bring a group. So you're dealing with more of, that engagement manager at that corporation, or that, vice president of, community something at that corporation. So I think it's both. And from our side, I think the ask is always someone who is, has really great interpersonal skills. And sometimes that isn't your lawyers. Okay. And I say that to mean sometimes I think that like when you're engaging in that conversation and figuring out what's a match and listening to what they have to say, and can we find a common thing? Like I think partnership negotiation isn't always a natural skill for a lawyer. So you might have a fabulous lawyer that's running a fabulous program, but they kind of see things a little bit more like, no, we can't do this or we can't do that. Right. And so I think that it's really kind of having someone delegated on your team, your pro bono coordinator or your leader, who's okay with having those little gray area conversations or being okay in those sorts of engagements. And I hope I didn't offend any lawyers here. I am one, and I have been told I can be like that sometimes.
I completely agree with that, Jill. I think sometimes our development team has been incredibly successful in like selling what we're doing and how we do it, that they want to do more, right? And we've had corporate partners and other individuals that want to be involved, and they're like, but we're not lawyers. So what can we do? What is the call that we can do and get our staff involved? So sometimes that has come from other sources and not even related to the direct client work, but it's just really talking about the mission, what you do, who you help. And I believe that individuals that hear it that are already inclined to do the work are going to want to get involved. So then being able to find a project, because as nonprofits, we have plenty of projects to do. And sometimes it's not the legal, but then once you get that corporate client in there, usually the law firms that they work with are going to want to be involved with what the corporate partners are doing. And then that also brings in additional pro bono attorneys to help us with the legal work. So I think it's being open and being just really selling the mission of the work that you do.
Okay, great. So my last question, I'm hoping folks in the audience can also kind of chime in on. I want to talk about that good old retaining. Like, yes, if you make them happy, more likely to come back, but also things are evolving. And so what have you seen in kind of the evolving nature of pro bono that you're kind of plugging into or spending more energy on recruitment, but also retention? Has its retention and kind of the way you acknowledge and appreciate your attorneys kind of changing at all?
So I do believe that in like a post-COVID world, the traditional, we're going to do a happy hour or an in-person appreciation event that involves something in the evening that people have to drive out to, is less popular as a stewardship piece. I just think that people are working virtually more often, and they're like, oh, I got to get dressed to go to this thing, to get it, this volunteer happy hour. That's just like less interesting, there less attendance, and especially now you're going to work with virtual. They might be all over the state, all over the country. So we're placing less emphasis on kind of having and putting money and resources into those like traditional events, I guess you could say, that involve food and drinks and all that stuff. I think stewardship at its best is, are we kind of engaging positively with them and they're walking away with a positive experience during that partnership, during that relationship, during that event, and just really focusing on that, making sure all team members are on board with that kind of mentality. And we've also worked on tracking cases. So for us, the attorney isn't attached to the case, but tracking cases. And if we have success stories, sending those success stories to pro bonos. And here's someone who became a citizen who came to a workshop. Maybe that wasn't the person you worked with or you talked to, but look, like what you did 10 months ago is now having an impact. And so I think just even success stories, guys, that's free to do. They really love to see that and makes them coming back. Understanding, I think the last part of this is understanding that in the immigration space that it will ebb and flow based on what people are seeing in the news and what their hearts are being compelled to do. So you will have times that your pro bonos are like, oh my God, beating down your door, I really need to talk to you, right? And because there's something in the news that's going on, or we know we do citizenship work. So leading up to elections, like everyone's going to want to help because I got to help make people citizens, and take advantage of those peak times, build your sustainability, knowing there's going to be peaks and then it's going to come down immediately. And so how are you stewarding in the down times, but also in the peak times? I might have 15 pro bonos email me and go, oh my gosh, I heard about family separation. What's going on? It does not hurt for me to have a standard copy and paste email where I respond to them and I go, here's what's going on under our understanding. Here's how I feel here at Baker Ripley in this work. Here's some resources on how to connect. It's a copy paste email. They will feel like they've gotten that kind of personal interaction because their heart is compelling them. And that stewardship is free. Yes, it takes time out of your day. You're like, oh my God, another email. But I think that it's effective because they want to feel like they're in the loop on what's going on, politically, geopolitically.
I completely agree with everything that Jill said. And really the experience while they're working with you is what's going to keep them engaged and committed and recruiting others. So responsiveness is incredibly important. Having the tools that they need so that they feel supported is also really, really important. And then sharing back the impact that they did, whether it was a clinic or even later, after the conclusion of the case, when we're wrapping up with clients and they're sharing like how responsive and how wonderful their attorneys was, like really share that information of what a difference that they shared or what they made in the life of this individual. We're also engaging a lot more on social media. We're sometimes inviting some of our pro bonos to come and share what their experience was like. And I know that that's been really helpful, and they really have enjoyed sharing their story and how they were able to make an impact.
Perfect. Anybody, we got one comment, newsletters, and make sure they reply to emails and questions, definitely. Maybe just like virtually, how are you doing in terms of virtual representation, and what kind of, as you think about, the tools clients are sometimes getting more familiar, some aren't, what does that decision tree look like when it comes to hosting, pro bono events, whether it's clinic or doing representation virtually versus in person?
I'll let Maria Carmen lead on that one because we crash and burn on virtual representation a lot of times. Internet just seems to go out every time we're trying to do it. But I mean, I do think that there's a code to crack. But I would say moving the trainings virtually now, so we don't do in-person trainings, we do it virtual. Oh, amazing, right? Because that's just easier on everyone's time, like we are here today, obviously. but that's
Yes,
going to
be. I mean, we transitioned to virtual work, and obviously our Afghan project was completely virtual, almost for everyone. Of course, the attorneys would meet with the clients in the locations that they were working with, but our entire relationship with many of our pro bonos was virtual. We did engage in all of our trainings virtually. We used so much technology to schedule, to make appointments, to keep engaged on a regular basis, a library that they could access where they could look for information, and where we kept the recordings of the office hours that they weren't able to engage in. Like, it was just tech became a big part of how we did this work and how we were able to do it over such a vast network, without being in the same city as our attorneys or sometimes even our clients.
So I guess I have two questions. One, how has your training of attorneys changed, knowing they're going to be communicating with survivors of violence, virtually? And second, how are there things you have to set up with clients, or are there additional kind of client-based practices you've had to, exercise to help them be effective with their volunteers?
We did. We had to do some safety planning and teaching pro bono attorneys how to safety plan, as if it was safe for them to share information. Were they in the house where they had some privacy? Like, having to ask those questions from the beginning was really important. I don't think that many of our attorneys that we work with pro bono are in those situations where it's not safe in the home that you're living, or, they're maybe working only with corporate clients that have an office, but, there's shared spaces, there's different things that we need to talk about as we're training them, that they need to incorporate into their script. And then we work with them to figure out how we can address some of those issues that, there's so many advantages of using, virtual spaces to connect. It was easier for many of our clients that didn't have to take time off from work or go to a downtown location. But then we also need to make sure that we're doing it in a safe way. And so we had to create trainings just about those pieces as well.
Great, thanks. Anyone have questions? Because I got like 5 more I could ask Jill and Mari Carmen, but I really want to prioritize your questions, everyone. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead. So for Talk Ready Justice Center, we have this co-counsel model, which means when the client is distraught and they call you 6 months in and say, I used to speak to my volunteer every week, and now I don't even know how to reach them. I don't know what's going on with my case. You're on it. You can just explode. Go to Houston Volunteer Lawyers. The idea is we're a matchmaker. We are not co-counsel. We screen the cases, we train the volunteers, we send it off, and we send them periodically emails to like, how are you doing? Assuming everything is fine. But when that client calls us, we're looking on the docket and we're trying from public information to see what's going on. And there's sometimes we're like, oh God, it's gone south. And I feel bad. So I guess, just to the audience and the crowd, and Mari Carmen, you worked for a long time without a co-counsel, just wondering, does anybody have opinions on best practices, co-counsel model versus pro bono attorney handoff?
Most definitely. I think ongoing, continuing contact with the client that you're supporting, or that, to get some status updates was really important, at least when I was in my previous organization. And also that expectation with our pro bono attorneys, which were not on a co-counsel situation, that we would be checking in periodically to get status updates, to get, to see if they were stuck in any area. I was working in domestic violence cases before, so we knew that things could develop very quickly in a lot of our family law cases, and just being there to offer support, ask how it's going. But we would check in with both client and our pro bono attorney on a regular basis.
Thank you. I know we're 1 minute at a time. So one question, just Savannah, do you want to elaborate on that? And I'd like your comment. Do either of you want to say anything?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm with Remain in Colorado, and we have been having this conversation a lot about the requirements for training for our pro bono attorneys versus the risk that it might be too much of a barrier for them to enter into the into these agreements if they have to attend to or they have to commit to too much training ahead of time. Whereas, you know, we just need people to take cases. So, but we want them to be trained and have the right knowledge, especially around trauma-informed lawyering. I think that's the main one, because obviously they need to know how to do the work. So the substantive law isn't as much of a question for them to be willing to attend a training. But the things like trauma-informed lawyering, it's like they're a little bit less inclined to be, for that to be a requirement for them, but it's also really important. So I don't know, it just thought I'd throw that out there and see how everyone else deals with that.
I think offering CILA that includes ethics and is a good way to sometimes recruit attorneys to go to trainings that are much more touchy-feely and ethics and what that really means. And everybody needs ethics credits. And so I think that that's how you do it. And that's one of the approaches, you know, that we worked on to make sure that they were going to those types of CLEs, is make sure that we offered ethics components. And I think that that was one tool and one approach to do it.
Thanks.
Can I add to that? So we've really been listening to what the pro bono coordinators have been saying, and the pandemic did really impact the ability of firms to just take on asylum cases. We did a lot of asylum work. And so that's how one of our projects came to be, which is a youth victim clinic. So we partnered with juvenile court and community schools, who I'd worked with for a long time, and made sure it would be comfortable for them and that they knew how this was going to work. We had picked 3 volunteer attorneys to test this out because they really expressed interest in working with at-risk youth and victims of gender-based violence. And again, listening to the attorneys, they wanted it to be done in like half a day. Hence, we had to think creatively, how do we do that? And so it was a matter of the pro bono coordinator in one room with the attorneys, basically explaining the logistics of what's about to happen. I'm in the other room with the young women, explaining what's about to happen. They're going to be in a room with one of the attorneys. Then we switch over. I'm doing some light discussion. They have coloring books, whatever, with the young women. And then we just switch sides. And then I do a training for the attorneys on the values and the T's. That's half an hour, right? And then there's Krispy Kreme donuts, there's like snacks, there's whatever we need, right? Things to doodle. And then everybody was separated. The 3 young women and the 3 attorneys were in their separate rooms. We went around just to make sure that everything was going smoothly. We did a final closeout session before the youth left. And then we had a half hour or so of a debrief. So we did it all in 4 hours. And that was just doing the screening. That was just doing the screening and the intake. And that way, you know, it was just an introduction to what this would be like. And what came out of it was that 2 of the attorneys said, I would like to be the pro bono attorney for this case, right, even though they had never done a U visa before. So, yeah. So, but it's a matter of, you know, there's a lot of things we have to balance. So I have to work with what's going to be workable with the school. So I'm really pretty much on their timetable of when they're ready to have the next clinic. So as excited as the attorneys are, and firms are starting to say, I want to do that too, it's not going to work on the firm schedule.
And I think the next
it's going to be on the school schedule.
Maybe our next title of next year, because I'm sure the ABA is going to want to host this again, is going to be a balancing act, right? Like, yes. And you know, even clinics that getting those volunteer attorneys to a yes on representation is also, you know, a really big win. So congratulations on that. I know we're out of time, right, of our session.
Yes.
And I want to just thank everyone, especially you, Jill and Mari Carmen.